I hope you're all having a great day. We are team number 506 and welcome to our presentation, In Pursuit of Economic Stability, the Road to Resilient Economy. In the aftermath of the Second World War, public debt to GDP was at a staggering 115%, fueled by years of emergency borrowing no matter what the cost. In the decades that followed, thanks to spending bills inspired by the New Deal, like the GI Bill, which made the cost of living more affordable for working and middle class Americans and boosted growth, combined with fiscal responsibility, the government was able to bring that ratio down to 30% before the Reagan administration. This allowed for great fiscal flexibility for the United States and allowed it to borrow as much as needed to face new challenges during the hottest part of the Cold War. We now approach a similar crossroad. America's publicly held debt to GDP ratio is at 98% as a result of the great financial crisis and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and is only projected to increase to 154% in the next 30 years with current policy. If America is to remain fiscally flexible to address potential economic challenges in the future and keep the dollar as the world's reserve currency, action must be taken to remake the economy and fiscal spending in order to set it on a stable path. While this appears to be a Herculean task, we know that America has done it before and it can do it again.
Let's dive into the details. As the budget deficit continues to climb and the government borrows more from the public, it will eventually crowd out private investment, having long-term ramifications on productivity and the health of capitalism in the US. As a result, interest payments have returned to late 1980s highs at around 3% of GDP, expecting to climb even further as the gap between revenues and outlays continues to widen. This especially poses a concern. The CPO identifies that rising interest payments could eat into discretionary spending, straining the fiscal budget. Furthermore, rising interest payments could lead to inflationary pressures. In the worst case, massive amounts of outstanding debt to the public can pose risk to government solvency. We can see that in the current budget, revenues will largely remain unchanged over time, with income and payroll taxes remaining a predominant share at around 80 to 85%. However, in expenditure composition, Medicare and Social Security are expected to jump at around 3% as each population continues to age. As a result, net interest payments are also expected to increase from around 14% to 17% of outlays.
Before we address budgetary problems, we must first acknowledge the current state of the economy. Weakening consumer sentiment, seemingly persistent inflation, loosening labor markets, impaired trade, and geopolitical uncertainty continues to provide short-term headwinds to the economy. At the same time, the aging population, wealth inequality, and climate change threaten the economy in the long term. Considering a time frame of 30 years, we have catered our recommendations towards addressing these long-term issues. We filter our policy recommendations through a dual approach system, valuing economic pertinence and debt to GDP optimization. Our end goal is to fulfill our objectives of political feasibility, optimal government efficiency, wealth equity, energy independence, and a resilient economy.
Our policy will be divided into three main initiatives: the green push, debt management, and growth investment. Our first policy that we would like to propose is the carbon tax. The increasing atmospheric temperature has led to flooding, fires, droughts, etc. that have destroyed infrastructure and caused crop damage. These extreme events have also harmed many vulnerable populations and have cost the nation $150 billion. Not only is our planet severely impacted, but our economy is too. As the global temperature increases by 1 degree Celsius, the global GDP is reduced by 12%. The policy we propose is to start with a $32 tax per metric ton of carbon dioxide emissions. This fee will increase at a rate of 5% each year, compounding annually. By pricing carbon, we encourage businesses and consumers to move towards cleaner, more sustainable energy options.
Additionally, we will be implementing a rebate system that returns 100% of tax revenues per capita. This lump sum payment will offset the higher energy prices and ensure that lower income families are not disproportionately burdened while mitigating GDP loss by 40 to 55%. We expect a reduction of around 1.5 billion metric tons per year. Furthermore, all income quintiles except for the top 20% will experience net welfare gains under this plan by around 3% of pre-tax income. However, as a result of initial productivity loss and inflationary pressure, debt to GDP is expected to increase by 0.78 percentage points. Still, we believe the alternative of no action would cause more damage to our environment and additional adverse economic impacts not priced into our model.
Our second policy in the green push is the nuclear energy tax credits. Nuclear energy is a crucial component of achieving net zero emissions, yet there is little economic incentive to retire the nation's vast coal burning infrastructure. The high fixed cost of nuclear power, particularly in construction, makes it less cost competitive in the short term compared to coal and natural gas, limiting private sector's investment and slowing the shift towards cleaner energy.
To address this, the Inflation Reduction Act currently offers a 30% investment tax credit for nuclear energy. However, expanding this to 50% and extending coverage through the construction phase would significantly lower capital costs, making nuclear power more financially viable. The economic benefits of this transition are substantial, as replacing just 1% of coal-generated electricity with nuclear would reduce CO2 emissions by 13.5 million metric tons annually. Additionally, every dollar invested in nuclear energy yields a $1.9 for local industry, $4.3 in GDP growth, and $1.4 in tax revenue. While nuclear energy requires significant upfront investment and has operational complexities, the necessary technological solutions already exist. Strategic financial incentives will not only enhance energy security and reduce emissions, but also stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and position the U.S. as a global leader in advanced nuclear technology.
Our third policy is our tax reform. The idea behind increasing taxes on high-income individuals and corporations is simple. It generates revenue for government programs, infrastructures, and public services. However, if not carefully structured, it could also discourage investment and economic activity. Under this proposal, we plan to raise the individual tax rate by 2% for the top 20% of earners. These high-income individuals would see a marginal increase in their tax rates, contributing more to federal revenue. Furthermore, we want to limit the tax benefit of itemized deductions by 15% of the total value. There are several advantages to this policy. The first being higher revenue with minimal economic disruption. This increase is designed to generate more government revenue without causing significant negative effects on the economy. The second being reduces wealth concentration and inequality. The wealth gap in society has been a growing concern. Raising taxes on higher income earners helps in redistributing resources, which can lead to a fairer economic landscape. The third being that it encourages savings. With higher taxations, individuals may look for ways to save and invest more wisely, leading to better financial planning and economic stability. While the benefits seem promising, we must also consider potential drawbacks. There are some challenges associated with increasing the individual taxes, the first being potential disincentives for higher earners and possible decline in corporate investment. According to projections, this policy would have significant economic effects over a 10-year period. The first being the GDP impact is higher individual income taxes are estimated to generate $2.5 trillion in government revenue, and the debt to GDP ratio being the policy is expected to reduce the national debt by 1.2 percentage points, contributing to fiscal stability. Our analysis shows that increasing individual taxes on high-income earners presents both opportunities and challenges.
For our fourth policy, we recommend a simple defense reform. The US already spends more than the next 9 countries combined and composes the majority of their US budget for defense. As a result, we believe that by reducing military personnel by 17%, we can reduce expenditures by $959 billion in the next 10 years. We would also gain the unique advantage of increasing operational efficiency as the military can lean out their numbers. Furthermore, as active personnel decreases, less machinery is necessary, giving the US another unique advantage to retire outdated equipment. There are some drawbacks to a sudden loss of personnel, namely a weakened geopolitical image and a decrease in jobs. However, we believe that our benefits will mitigate the geopolitical loss and that long-term arbitrage in the job market will make up for the short-term job loss. Overall, we expect debt to GDP to decline by 2.2 percentage points. Our fifth policy for debt management is to federally recognize nurse practitioners to provide primary care. Currently, Medicare expenditures is expected to grow to 60% of total outlays by 2050. However, by allowing nurse practitioners to act as primary providers, we can not only decrease primary costs by 34%, but also total US medical spending by 19% and 27% of spending on preventable diseases and issues, as primary care is often the first checkpoint in identifying health complications. Furthermore, as doctors are less pressured to enter primary care, they will be more incentivized to specialize occupations, increasing their productivity. As a result, we expect expenditures to decrease by just over $3 trillion in the next 10 years, despite the upfront transitory administrative costs on the hospitals. As a result of the policy, debt to GDP would decrease by 7 percentage points. Our final debt management policy is Social Security reform. As the US population ages, the working age population will shrink relative to the retired, decreasing the tax base while simultaneously increasing Social Security benefits. As a result, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is expected to be fully depleted by 2033, and from there, either eating into benefits or incurring additional outlays in the fiscal budget. We maintain that a change to a complex issue like the solvency of the OASI Trust Fund, we need to tackle it from a variety of directions. Our first policy proposal is to increase the payroll tax from 12.4% to 12.6%, split between employers and employees. The second is to eliminate the loophole where limited partners and owners of S corporations are able to escape payroll taxes by imposing a tax on all payments active, regardless on the classification of businesses or personal income. Finally, we suggest to increase the maximum taxable ceiling to 90%. Although this policy does not address inefficiencies in Social Security benefits, it was done intentionally to remain politically neutral. With these policies, the OASI Trust Fund is expected to remain solvent throughout 2045. As a result, 10-year expenditures and debt to GDP are expected to reduce by around $1.5 trillion and 3.94 percentage points, respectively.
Our policy for the growth initiative is to fund the USCIS $12.84 billion to process the entire immigration backlog. According to CBO projections, immigration will be the sole positive driver for the working age population growth by 2033. As a result, we believe that it is critical to increase the US's efforts in immigration. Currently, the backlog consists of around 1.7 million for employment immigration and around 5.9 million for family immigration as of 2023. According to the Bipartisan Policy Group, a full process of this backlog will allow 1 million new entrants into the labor force, contributing to 0.5 percentage points productivity growth. Additionally, on average, immigrants have a positive marginal fiscal benefit as they add more to GDP than they receive from the government. As a result, in 10 years, we expect GDP to increase by $3.9 trillion and expenditures to increase by $12.84 billion, culminating in a 9.63 percentage point decrease in debt to GDP. Furthermore, we believe that immigration policy is the primary way to combat the US's inverted population growth, making actionable policies like this imperative.
In terms of political feasibility, a green initiative will likely be adopted by the left, as they have historically pushed for green energy, evident in Biden's IRA policy. The Democrats have also historically supported defense cuts and have politically anchored many of the defense budget growth proposals from the right. For the Republicans, we believe that the medical reform would disproportionately benefit Republican rural areas where primary care is sparse. The other policies are more neutral. We believe our tax incentives, although historically opposed by Republicans, may gain traction with the short-term weaknesses in our economy, as our top 20 percentile tax would primarily tackle wealth inequality. Furthermore, a Social Security reform remains neutral as it would not affect the composition of benefits offered, but rather only increase tax revenue for the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund. Finally, our policy on backlogs will remain neutral as it does not affect the limits of immigration from each nation, nor the legality, but rather just the efficiency of the process.
To estimate the potential effects of our proposed policies, we use an in-house dynamic budgetary and economic model that takes into account changes in net interest outlays, other budget items, and the GDP, and compounds their effects year by year. From our model, we see that as a result of our proposed policies, the debt to GDP ratio will drop to around 90% by 2055. Furthermore, interest payments as percent of total outlays will see significant decline as total debt accrual decreases. Finally, with our Social Security reform, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund would remain solvent through 2045. It is clear that our policies will increase GDP growth, lower debt levels, and keep the US in sound financial footing, all while being politically feasible. To save America's future, it's time to act now. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to further discussing our proposals.